Porter Airlines wants to expand by introducing larger Whisper jets and extending a runway further into Lake Ontario. Joining us now to tell us if these plans will ever get off the ground, Joseph de Cruz, Professor of Strategic Management at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management, Antonio Gomez Palacio, Principal at Dialogue, an urban design and architecture firm, Marcus G., the Toronto columnist for the Globe and Mail, and Lisa Rochon, architecture critic also with the Globe and Mail. We should also tell you our producer Meredith Martin and online editor Daniel Kitts are hosting a Twitter chat on this topic right now. So send us your thoughts on the airport expansion and the city's relationship with green space. And use the hashtag AgendaTVO. And it's good to have everybody around the table for this discussion. And I want to start by, I don't know how you newspapers are going out of business, because Porter is giving you guys tens of thousands of dollars, it seems, every day to take out these new ads. Here's the latest. This was in newspapers a lot lately. And here's, I'm just going to read a little bit of the copy at the bottom here as they try to make the case for their new jets. Here we go. The new Whisper jet that Porter plans to use for our North American expansion is the Bombardier CS-100. Its remarkable new technology makes it the quietest commercial jet in production, tailor-made for an urban airport like Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport. The CS-100 is comparable to the sound profile of the quiet Q400 that we already fly. We agree that there is no place for noisy jets on the Toronto waterfront, and that's why Porter is asking the City of Toronto for an exemption from the jet ban in place at Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport, only for the CS-100 Whisper jet. With this approval, no other jet aircraft would be allowed to fly from the airport. And just so you get a sense about what's proposed compared to what's currently allowed, control room, can we bring this next shot up? We're going to just basically superimpose one plane over the other so you can see the comparison between what Porter flies now with what Porter hopes to fly. And yes, the jet is somewhat bigger, but they insist no noisier. Let's go around the table here and start with full disclosure. Lisa, have you flown Porter before?
Absolutely.
Do you like it?
I do like it in its first iteration as sort of that charming way to get away, to fly in a sweet way to New York, to take the ferry. Love that.
And avoid Pearson.
Absolutely. Hated the commute to Pearson. Bad air quality, of course, indicative of how badly our transportation system has been planned, that we are forced to commute very long distances and in stop-and-go traffic in order to get to a major international airport. That was the draw for me, for Porter.
Okay, hold
flying
it there.
Very quickly
and
sweetly.
We'll come to the future in a second. Joseph, do you fly Porter?
All the time.
Do you like it?
I love it because I can leave my office 40 minutes before flight time, catch a cab, take the ferry, walk to the plane, and I'm in the air.
Because you're on the downtown campus of U of T.
That's right.
So it's very convenient for you.
Extremely.
Okay. How about it?
Likewise, I've taken Porter on a number of occasions, and we just recently moved, but my office was right around the corner from there, and I used to walk to the airport and take a flight. My sense is that for a lot of those short flights and commutes, makes a lot of sense.
Marcus?
I live downtown, about 10 minutes by bike from Porter. I haven't ridden my bike to take the plane yet, but you could. That's the great thing about it. It's so convenient.
So we got 4 Porter fans here, so to speak. Okay, in which case, when you heard the news that they wanted to expand and use these bigger planes, let's get to it. What'd you think?
Concerned, deeply concerned.
Deeply concerned?
Yeah.
How come?
I think it changes up the whole scenario of what was originally intended, which was short-haul flights at the Toronto Island, an option, an alternative, a decent little urban alternative to the big airport and the awful commute. By opening up the gates to jets, I think we've now entered a whole new frontier. I think that it would be Pollyannish to consider or even think that it's going to be exclusive to Porter, that we're not going to see a whole rush of other carriers with their old style Airbuses coming to Toronto Island.
But they insist that if you can keep the noise levels the same, there should be no reason to open it up to other planes.
But that's for a jet that's in development, never been built before. It's not like iPhones that come out every other year or every year. Airplanes are only rarely redesigned. And sure, the new one that's being proposed by Bombardier is a better, cleaner jet. A lot of jets that are flying right now around the world and that would ultimately be using the Toronto Island Airport are not new, clean. So I think there's a lot of doublespeak we have to get through.
So you're a no at the moment.
Absolutely
Marcus,
no.
what are you right now?
Well, I think if what Mr. DeLucia Porter is saying is correct, and the jets are roughly comparable in noise, then that, to me, erases a lot of the concern. He wants also to build a slightly longer runway, but if that doesn't impinge too much on the harbor, and he says it won't, then I think those are the two major concerns, and I think they've allayed those, at least in my mind. You have to remember a lot of the things that we have been said over the years about the horrors of what would happen if the island airport took off as a destination, which it has under Porter, have proved to be completely untrue. For instance, we're going to ruin the waterfront. Nobody would want to live there. Well, there are condos popping up all over the place, blocks away. It would ruin it as a recreational site. Well, tens of thousands of people stream to Center Island, which is minutes away. They go to the beach, they walk along the waterfront. They're just redesigning a part of Queens Quay there to make it more inviting, so it hasn't stopped waterfront redevelopment either.
So the doomsayers have not proved to be correct so far.
That's right.
And you feel there's no reason why they should be, even with this added development.
I don't think so. I don't see a coming catastrophe. Some councillors, for instance, Adam Vaughan, said they're paving over the lake. And another said, David Miller, the former mayor, said it's going to return the waterfront to an old industrial use. We should rip it up and put in a park. Well, I think the island airport is very popular in Toronto. People love it. They like flying Porter. And here's a businessman who wants to expand. He wants to create, he says, 1,000 new jobs. He wants to spend money on Canadian-made planes, up to $2 billion on Canadian-made planes. It's all good.
He's having a hard time seeing the downside here. Do you see it?
Well, I kind of take it back to the main purpose of why we're putting an airport there, which is to support downtown living and, and the downtown and waterfront's ability to be a place to work and to visit and to play. And if at any point the airport starts to compromise that, we've actually lost the reason why we're doing it. And we're starting to kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Is that your concern, that this development will do that?
Well, the concern is I think there's a threshold at which point, say, if you're no longer able to sit on a patio at the waterfront on a summer's day because of the activity in the airport, that's a threshold that we've gone over. And the big question in my mind is, at what point is there an undue impact, be it noise, be it, the profile of the waterfront, be it even the height cones and the travel space coming into the airport. There's a couple of things that we would need to very clearly establish as this is what supports downtown living, and this is what supports the downtown as a place to attract business. And if we pass those thresholds, then we're losing out.
Right. Let me ask the business professor. Do you think they've made the business case for an exemption for this new plane if it happens?
This is a very bold move on Porter's part, and it's also very risky from a business point of view.
How come?
Well, two things. From the operational point of view, they now will have two types of aircraft, which adds huge complexity to the operations. And every low-cost airline that I know of has succeeded because they have only one type of aircraft.
They kept it simple.
And kept it very simple. So he's got a challenge on his hands there. The other challenge he has is Air Canada and WestJet, because they're not going to allow Porter to come in without a fight.
They're going to want in too.
No, they're going to drop prices. So there'll be a price war. They can't get into the island airport. The slots are limited. I don't agree with Lisa, by the way, that all the other commercial jets will come in, because the
Air
slots,
Canada's already there.
but not with a jet.
Very minor way.
They can't bring in
Jazz.
an Airbus, for example, into that airport. It's not long enough. They'd have to double the runway to safely bring in an Airbus.
So given the complications you've just described, is it a slam dunk that if Porter gets its way, it will make more money?
No, it's not a slam dunk. It's a high risk gamble. On the other hand, it's changing the whole nature of the game very significantly. Porter was a niche airline serving people who came in and out of downtown Toronto, basically. And now they'll have a North American footprint.
Do you object to this then?
No, I don't. I think it's wonderful for Toronto that we can now, if Porter succeeds, we will have business people who can travel anywhere in North America from downtown Toronto much more conveniently.
Will you humor me with a little speculation here?
Sure.
Okay, let's try this. I remember, I think it's probably 30, maybe 40 years ago, Max Ward started up this airline called Ward Air.
Yep.
And then he said, I need to expand, I need to go buy some more planes. And, you know, he had never really had any intention of buying those planes. What he wanted to do was get taken over, and that's what happened. Canadian Pacific, as it then was, bought him out, and Ward Air doesn't exist anymore. And I guess there's some people who think Bob DeLuce is doing the same thing with Porter. He's making this claim that he wants to get bigger and buy these bigger planes, when in fact, what he wants is to be bought out. What's your view?
Steve, your Ward Air story is not supported by the facts. Right? The facts
That won't stop me.
No, I know.
But okay.
No, the facts about Max Ward were that he had a brilliantly successful vacation airline, right? And he had a brilliantly successful strategy. He then decided to expand into scheduled service. That was a big mistake, because that brought him into direct rivalry with Air Canada and Canadian Airlines. And a small, brilliantly successful airline doesn't do well against an incumbent who has very deep pockets and a great deal to lose.
But bottom line, you don't think this is about a future hope of being taken over by a bigger player?
No, I don't think so. I think DeLuce has airlines in his blood, and he'll want to run that airline for a long time. He's been very successful with Porter.
Okay.
And that's part of his DNA now.
Marcus, you've watched City Hall. He obviously needs the votes at City Hall to make this thing happen. Has he got them?
Initially, certainly it didn't look very good. A lot of the city councilors felt sandbagged. He gave this big press conference. He said, we're getting jets, we want runways. And a lot of councilors said, nobody talked to me about this. And there is an ironclad agreement with the federal government, the Port Authority, and City Council that says no jets. So a lot of councilors initially were quite negative. I think, though, that the debate has changed a bit from the Miller days when, as you said in your intro, Miller actually ran against a bridge to the island airport, and that was a popular thing. Now that Porter's taken off and has had a few years going, people are realizing what an asset the island airport is. Something like 2/3 in a recent poll said they thought it was an asset. So I think that the tone of the debate has changed because of Porter's success and because so many people have used the airport. They're willing at least to be open-minded about the idea that this might be doable. So I think councillors will listen to their constituents on that, even the ones who were initially, some who were initially negative.
Antonio, do you think the hoops that they're going to have to jump through to get this through City Council are too difficult?
Probably, I'd look at the public debate and kind of where a lot of the public is on this, and certainly there's very different camps. We've done work with the people in like Little Norway and the residents around there, and they have one very direct perspective, which has to do with noise and traffic. But you start to broaden the circle, and then it's about the convenience of travel. People in the financial district have also a perspective that is much more about joining in and kind of doing those travels. So I think it's not a slam dunk in any scenario, right? They are going to have to face very different positions on this, and probably the long list of deputations is going to be interesting.
I wonder if some of the deputants will be your parents. Your parents live down there, right?
Yeah. They live in the Queen's Quay condo.
What's their take on this?
Well, I can tell you, I live in the beaches, and when I call them, we have to stop the conversation because it's so loud because of the planes. So I think to say that the planes are quiet and nobody's really bothered by them, I'm not bothered by them in the beaches, certainly. I think a lot of people, living or, further north are not bothered at all. But I think until you have experienced what it is to live right there at the waterfront, I don't think you can really understand. And my parents are very urban, very tolerant, very open-minded.
When did they move there?
They moved there about 15 years ago.
Oh, so there was an airport there when they moved there.
Yeah, but not nearly. I mean, like any airport around the world, whenever there is an airport, whether it's London City Centre Airport or even Portland Airport or even LaGuardia, if you build an airport, they will come. So more and more planes have been flying out of the island airport at quite an astonishing rate, much like London City Centre. And it's noisy already. I think there are about, it's about a plane a minute taking off or landing.
Isn't some noise, though, a degree of urban life? a condition of urban life. I mean, people are living in
Of
condos
course,
down
of
there
course.
who are
We're
right
not
next.
living in the country, but
You're
I mean,
living
I'm
next
saying,
to the Gardner
but-
down there. You're
yeah.
living next to the lake shore. You're living next to streetcars and subways.
The noise of the
no-
Gardner is nothing compared to the plains.
Oh, the Gardner's
taking
pretty
off.
noisy.
Mind you, they've got sound, what do you call those things? Bafflers or whatever they're called? Baffles? To prevent the noise from
I
going
think
on.
what's happened here is like the 1983 tripartite agreement has been essentially risks being torn up. Why was that put in place in the first place? Well, it was really to protect livability of a waterfront community that has grown and thrived in the subsequent years. So I find this conversation about Robert Deluce and how he's doing as a businessman, et cetera, totally at odds with the $1.2 billion that Waterfront Toronto has invested along the waterfront and the $2.4 billion that the private sector, Hines, Great Gulf, have invested in building condominiums, new forms of waterside living. So I find that there's, once again, a lot of confusion about what Toronto or what kind of city we really want.
Well, let me put that to Joseph if I can. We're obviously dealing with competing rights here. On the one hand, as Lisa has explained, the rights of the people to have a livability in their neighborhoods. On the other hand, the rights of this guy to try to make as much money as he can and provide as good a service as he can to the people who want it. Who should win?
I don't see it that way, Steve. I see it another way. There's a bunch of people who are customers of Porter, and there are a bunch of people who are concerned about the noise of Porter. And that's the two camps. It's really interesting that Ipsos Reid did a survey of the people who live on Queen Street. 50% of the people surveyed actually have flown on Porter and love it. So there's a large number of people who live fairly close to that airport, plus all the people in the downtown office towers on the one camp, for whom the convenience of that airline is a major consideration. And then there's a bunch of people who live on the island and some people who live in the condos just abutting the flight path of the airline who are concerned about the noise. Those are the two camps.
You know what, we should bring this map up here at this point because the fact is that 99% of Torontonians don't live anywhere near this. And, obviously people who live in the rest of the province may not even know the area we're talking about, but there it is. And you can see sort of in the top left, there's the Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport. And presumably they want to extend that runway, as one Toronto City councillor said, right into Lake Ontario, but I guess it'd be about 300 meters going east. And from an urban planning perspective, Antonio, what do we want this land to be? Do we want it first and foremost as parkland for everybody to enjoy? Or do we want it to be that convenient second spot where people who don't want to go to Pearson Airport and maybe want to do short hauls can enjoy it?
I would say two things. One is, downtowns thrive in complexity. And I'll talk about transportation in a second, but a working, living downtown is critical, right? We look at Granville Island, it has industry right in the middle of it, and having that industry is a big part of it. Having operational pieces and some of the aspects of the port functions is a great part of a thriving downtown. The fact that we're having this conversation means that there's a lot of people, there's a lot of activities, and the complexity is a good sign. And that we have this complexity is a good sign.
Well, what does complexity argue for in this case?
It argues for that vibrancy. It argues for the ability of a lot of different people to be able to do different things at different times.
So does
they
that
can
mean
live, they can work, they can play, they can visit, all within very short distances.
Okay, but
And they can fly Porter.
is that part? That's what I want to know. Does it mean yes to parks and yes to bigger jets at the island airport?
No, it means yes to things to a certain scale as they relate to each other. So if the airport gets too big and it starts to serve a much bigger region, I would always argue that international airports have to be outside of the periphery of the cities, because it no longer is about the downtown. It's no longer about that core of the city. So the scale of the airport right now is very much tied to the function of what you can get out of the downtown.
Lisa, what's your sense of where the public's at in this? And I remind you that, as Marcus said, there's a forum poll out that said 63% of residents say a downtown airport's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to look back at the 1960s when the airport was built. It was around the same time that the Gardiner was rammed across our downtown. In fact, at that time, the Gardiner was going to go crashing right over Fort York. I mean, this is the kind of thinking that seems truly foreign at this point. So there was a whole other idea about how to create cities and how to plan for them, or just copy whatever Los Angeles was doing. And the airport at that time was very busy. Since then, of course, Pearson has enjoyed a massive investment, and we're expecting the fast link to the airport. But there seems to be a real imbalance potentially around what that island airport should be, how it should be maintained, how it needs to respect the waterfront community, but also just to kind of think about cities not just as purely utilitarian, but places where you can really create urban pleasures, and even think about cities as virtuous, as being virtuous. So what is the right thing to do, rather than just always embellishing the pockets of the private sector?
Well, but some would say that traveling with much more convenience in an urban setting, in a simpler setting, is part of what you've just described.
And I would say there is many, I'm a big believer in urban flow, so let's create way more bicycle paths. Let's allow ourselves to move now, like as you can in Paris, on bicycles, or Copenhagen or Amsterdam. Let's get on bikes. Let's figure out bike lines.
That won't get you to Sudbury or New York, though.
It won't,
How does an
but I'm
airport
talking
keep
about
us from
flow.
having bikes?
Way better public transit. Our transit has to have much greater investment. Yes, big Pearson Airport, ways to get to and from the big airport seamlessly. Even Vancouver is quite superior at this point. They have a fast link. But let's not upset the balance. Toronto Island Airport was created at a time when there wasn't a big, massive international airport. I thought it was a sweet iteration at the time when Porter first went in. By ripping up the tripartite agreement, I think it really upsets the balance and the need to respect downtown vibrant living with flow.
You haven't convinced your colleague at the Globe yet.
Well, to me, it's okay to be at odds.
To me, this is actually the great virtue of the airport, is modern cities thrive on mixed use. I mean, it's not all parks, it's not all industry. What we have in developing the waterfront is really something quite exciting. We have recreational use. We are getting new bike paths right down there. We also have a thriving airport that you can reach in 15 minutes from the core. And it's all happening at the same time together. And it's actually working. I mean, despite all the warnings about catastrophe, they're getting along, these uses. The condos are going in, people are living down there, people are enjoying recreation down there. I'm a sailor. I sail on Toronto Harbor.
So you should be opposed to this.
I should be. I almost grew up on Toronto Island. I spent all my summers there. I love the island.
Because this will affect where boats can go.
They're my favorite part of Toronto. But it doesn't break my heart to see a Porter jet fly in. I think it's exciting and almost inspiring to see a jet come in. It doesn't ruin my experience sailing around the harbor at all. So I think that's the very virtue of this thing, the fact that we're getting this mixed use and coexisting, which is a kind of urban thing to do.
Joseph,
Let me bring us back to the business picture. Right? Every time Porter entered a new route, the prices of its rivals went down by anywhere up to 25%. So when Porter started flying into New York, for example, all of a sudden Air Canada discovered that it could fly into New York 25% cheaper. But it took Porter to push them. So now let me make a forecast. If Porter succeeds and brings jets into that island airport, prices across Canada and across North America will trend downward. And if Porter survives, they'll stay down because Porter is a more efficient carrier.
So you would actually make a public interest argument here that it's in the public interest that Porter be able to do what it does
in the consumer's interest.
For the whole country.
Yep.
Not just for the island.
Yep.
But surely citizens don't decide about how much they love their city based on how cheap a flight might be. I mean, surely there are a whole bunch of other factors that can be brought into the conversation around livability, urban delight, public parks. By the way, the number of friends of public parks has doubled in the last 2 years. So there used to be 40 friends of the parks. There are now 80 friends.
These are
So I
public
think
groups, you mean?
these are public groups who are really interested in protecting and enhancing the parks in Toronto. So I think increasingly, as we become more and more kind of in love with our city, the idea of protecting and enhancing public space is rising in an astonishing way. I don't think it can be reduced right down to how much your plane ticket is. And besides, with the fast link to Pearson, I think that's going to improve competition as well. I mean, it's going to just create access to Pearson. I am more likely to want to go to Pearson on a fast link,
That's 10 years away, though.
than right now.
That's 10 years away.
2015, I believe.
Fast link to Pearson?
Yeah.
Think it'll be done by then?
2015.
Yeah, and I
We'll
would
see.
also argue that from the economic development side of things, sure there might be a business case for the airport. There's also a huge business case for the downtown. And Waterfront Toronto and many others are really trying to attract investment there. And so we need to keep that also at the forefront of the bigger economic picture.
Would bigger jets necessarily affect that?
Well, that's the critical question, right? And I do put my benchmark if having a beer on a patio in front of the waterfront, right? If I'm still able to do that, then that's great.
I'm going to channel the ghost of Robert Moses for a second here, okay? And he's looking around and he's saying, here's this big, now fourth biggest city in North America, city Toronto, which wants to say no to a bigger airport in the city center, which wants to say no to a casino downtown. This is a city that just wants to say no all the time to any big, and we're going through it with transit as well, where we've had a lot of no's before we may be eventually at a yes. Is this a city that just doesn't really like the notion of more development and getting bigger?
So. And in many instances, it's much harder to say no than to say yes, right? Because we look at this in municipalities and many other cities which are so desperate for anything, they say yes to anything, and guess what? Half of things get wrecked. It's really hard to be able to say no and to wait out for a better thing or something that is of a higher quality. And often what happens is you say no enough times, things come back to you with a higher degree of quality, with more thought, with more study, and you can really raise the bar on things.
Marcus, does the city say no too often?
Well, I don't mind if we say no to casino. I'm on a different camp on that one. But I think we do have to realize that we are entering a whole new level as a city. As you say, we just surpassed Chicago to become the fourth biggest city in North America. We're adding hundreds of thousands of immigrants and new people. We have to expand our infrastructure in all sorts of ways. Definitely transit, airports for sure. And here we happen to have a really great infrastructure asset in this island airport. And I think to allow it to expand a little bit within limits, noise limits and so on, is a reasonable way to accommodate the growth, and it's huge growth we're seeing. As a financial center, this is a huge asset for people who work on Bay Street. If you want to do business in Chicago, boom, you're on Porter. Your counterpart in Chicago, boom, he's here. That's a big thing for a growing city.
But you're a yes to Porter, but you're a no to the bigger jets that WestJet or Air Canada might want to bring in. Is that right?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to see what they're proposing on that. Porter says it just wants these particular jets.
Right.
The other two are getting their elbows up and saying, no, we want a piece of the action too. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Joseph, from a business point of view, does this city say no too often to development, big development, helpful development?
Well, I think it says yes to big developers too often, and oftentimes the big developers run over everybody else's interest. So I think the city does an insufficient job of saying no to the developers. When it comes to major infrastructure, we are very slow. I contrast this with China. Look at the amount of infrastructure China has built.
Well, they do have one big advantage over us in that respect, though, right? I mean, if you're an authoritarian communist government, you don't have to worry about neighborhood groups too often, do you?
Yes, but there's also a case to be made for moving a bit closer to the Chinese model, and let's get things done. Let's get the transit built. right? And let's get the link to the airport. I've been hearing about this link to the airport for God knows how many years.
40 years.
And
It is happening now, and it is moving ahead. Finally, at long last.
Yeah. Do we say no in this city too often?
No.
We don't say
We
no
say
enough?
yes. We're yes men. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. 170 condominium towers being built right now. Most of them not very interesting, not sustainable.
So those are the big developers that Joseph is talking about.
Right, but I think that we also have a very confused sense of direction around urban transit and a very distressing relationship with the province, for instance, who is trying to move ahead on some of the Metrolinx plans. I think that the casino development, naturally Mayor Ford is all for it. I think it's hugely problematic. It would be disastrous, I think, for the downtown, and really would bring us back again several decades at a time when the City of Toronto is showing some real interest and real sophistication and is, I think, starting to reach out to this new generation of the millennials. And certainly the millennials, the 20-something kids are interested in creative enterprises, cultural fusion.
Not a casino.
And they're not interested in hermetic experiences
Gotcha.
that take them off the street.
That's the last word. Forgive me, Marcus. That's our time. Anyway, let me thank everybody for being on the program. Joseph de Cruz from the Rotman School of Management, Antonio Gomez Palacio from Dialogue, the urban design and architecture firm, Lisa Rochon, the architecture critic from the Globe and Mail, and I want to see one of those editorial meetings now when she and Marcus G go at it. The Toronto columnist from the Globe and Mail on opposite sides of this one. That was good.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.